So, starting a new project with the Tau Broadside battlesuit. Let me just get this guy unpacked and we'll see what we're dealing with. Definitely wanting to do the railgun variant, always been my favourite thing about the Tau. It's been a while since I actually completed a model. Usually I'll start one and then another and then another, and then before I know it, the one that I actually wanted to do will be in my to-do box. The instructions seem fairly simple, so let's crack on and see what happens. Nothing too complicated on the despairing and cleaning up process, just pick the part and clean it with a sharp hobby knife instead of a scraping tool. I will say though, be careful with the knife as the danger of cutting or stabbing yourself is always there. If you feel confident though and willing to accept that risk, then go for it. If not, stick to a scraping tool. For the gluing, I'm not using anything too fancy, just Rebel's contactor. I do see on various sites, Reddit, Facebook, Twitter and the like, the question how do you unclog the end. Personally, my favourite way is to get a cable tie from electronic packages, strip the end off and use that thin wire. It works a treat, so my handy tip I guess would be keep a hold of these cable ties as you'll never know when you might need them. Now, you're probably wondering why my left hand has paint on it. You can blame a side project for a friend. I was priming a 3D print and using my airbrush and I'd run out of gloves. Another amazing tip I can give you is read the instructions. Obviously I know that, but as you can see I didn't. No major damage, but quite literally trying to get a round peg into a square hole. So, do as I say, not as I do. The rest of the building process was pretty uneventful, only stabbed myself twice, which is pretty normal for me. Nothing too fancy for the pose on the model, just the generic one that's on the box. As I said earlier, I'm going for the railgun variant of this model. In a past life when I did actually play a Warhammer as a Tau player, my army did consist of 27 railguns and nothing much else. At long range I was untouchable, these days though I'm just in the hobby for the painting. With the cutting, cleaning and building complete, I've gotten to the point where putting it together would make the painting harder, so I'm just going to work with these sub-assemblies. Over in my paint booth I'm going to be using these two primers for the black and white parts of the model, along with a hardened steel Beck Ultra D. I'm going to be using a 0.2mm nozzle with a PSI of about 15 to 20. I'm going to be honest though, I'm pretty new to airbrushing, so I still need a lot of practice before I can dedicate an entire mini to just airbrushing. Might be a nice experiment for the future though. Okay, so some eagle-eye viewers might notice that the model is already black. Why? Well, I forgot to hit record. On another note though, I am attempting some zenithal highlighting. I'm back over to the hobby desk. You want to play spot the difference? Here's a hint. I may or may not have gone back and primed the whole model as white, as I decided to switch from the custom Tau chapter that I was doing to an official one and wanted to start from scratch. I think that is the beauty of this hobby. If you don't like something, you can go back and change it. Nothing is permanent, and it is down to your own tastes. Also, hope you don't mind me working my PJs, working late at night just before bedtime. Also some bonus points if you can guess what type of dressing gown I'm wearing. At this point, with a nice uniform colour, I could see any imperfections in the model. Using a fine needle file, it was easy to get rid of them. Now, because I'm a lazy sod trying to find the easiest way to do things, I went ahead and masked off the parts that I wanted to leave white, so I could go back and prime again with the parts that I wanted to be black. This flexible thin tape is really useful for applications just like this, and it's just the right size for these scale of minis. I think it's electrical tape, but I couldn't say for sure. There's nothing too complicated, just mask off where you don't want the next colour to be. For awkward angles and shapes, you're going to have to cut the shapes out of the tape. Once done, I do recommend using something like an airbrush part holder, so that you don't get your fingers dirty. Back over in the spray booth, I just went to town and covered all the parts in black using the same primer as before. Once you've got all the masking tape off, you could in theory stop here. I don't think it'd be frowned upon to use this as a basic tabletop model if you just wanted to play the game. But for me, I think I'm going to try and go for my version of what's on the box art. So it's time to get on with some painting. I'm using the Army Painter's wet palette. I've used my own homemade version in the past, but I found that I get much better results with something that's professionally made. Nothing too complicated here, just wet the sponge and put the paper on top. First colour is GW's Uthuan Grey. Looking back, I probably should have airbrushed on to get a nice consistent and smooth coat, but using a brush is just fine. All you really need to do is just apply enough thin coats until you're happy with the result. Now for the parts that I'd consider mechanical, I'm using GW Abaddon Black, pretty much exactly the same as the Uthuan Grey, just in reverse. Now following the box art, I am going to create some accents using GW's Dawnstone. You don't have to follow the box art if you don't want to, but for this particular sect I am. Again, with the other colours, it's probably going to take at least 2 coats. The last major colour for the mini is a flourish of GW Corn Red. You can add it anywhere you want, but really it's just going to be the head and the shoulder for now. Now this is where your model's really going to pop. Using some GW Agrax shade, we're going to do some recess shading. Word of warning though, there are 2 versions of this, a matte and a gloss, so make sure you don't actually pick up the gloss by mistake like I have done in a few times in the past. Now you are going to have to try and be as accurate as possible with this step. It is a ridge and a recess shade. If like me you do have a natural shake though, just try and do the best you can, and you can always come back and tidy mistakes if you need to. For me this is a key step. If anything else you do need to do some shading. Edge highlighting is something that will definitely create a new dimension in your mini. Depending on your scheme and the style, you can go from subtle to contrasting, but it is really up to you. For me, I wanted to go down the subtle route, so finding a colour that was a few tones higher than the base colour is what's called for here. Now for the ulthull grey, you'll want to use something like GW's Coraxoid, but in this case I decided not to highlight the brighter grey armour. Same idea with the Dawnstone, you'll want to use GW's Celestra Grey for this. Over the Abaddon Black I went with a dark grey, in this case GW's Corvus Black. Initially it did start out as an edge highlight, but honestly I wasn't liking how it turned out. Not to mention, as you can tell, the shakes were really bad this day, so I decided to opt for a dry brushing instead. I did like this result more as it gave the black parts a more of a charcoal type look, and the texture is exactly what I think the Tau metal would look like. The dry brush here is pretty heavy. You don't want to completely cover the black undercoat, but you don't want to leave a lot showing. Remember to go slow, it is easier to add than it is to take away. Don't worry, I didn't forget about the Broadside's head and shoulder. GW's Wildfire Red as an actual edge highlight is what you need here. Now let's do some actual metallics. I did deviate from the box art a little here. Pretty much anything that had these 2 semicircular designs plus the Tau symbol on the chest, ear and shoulder were fair game. You'll need a few coats of GW's Retributor armor on before shading with Agrax Airshade. Once you're happy with the base colour, you'll want to switch over to GW's Auric Armor Gold. Now this isn't so much an edge highlight, but you will want to start at the edge and make it strongest, then feather out the gold colour from there. Finally, take some GW Runefang Steel and do exactly the same thing but focus more towards the edge. The last little bit of detail to make the model pop is to add some blue power indicators. You want to do this inside the railgun, in the power core, and on what would be the eyes. Now the base is pretty boring as is. It's fine if you want to do it as a basic tabletop mini, but I want to do something a bit different. First off, we'll need to figure out where the broadside is going to stand on here. Pretty much in the middle is fine. Once you know where it's going to be, I would score it with a hobby knife so you don't put any basing material where the feet are going to be. It is a bit hard to see on camera, but it's just a guide. I'd recently gotten my hands on some of this Vallejo earth texture, never used it, so I thought this would be a good chance. Now it might seem pretty obvious, but it does have the texture of muddy sand, but I guess that is the point. One thing I will say though is that I was using a metal sculpting tool and the sound it makes my teeth feel weird. It's like those ASMR videos where people cut sand with a knife. The sound just makes me feel weird. So I switched to a plastic tool instead. I decided to try and mix up the texture on the base, so I used GW's Astral Granite Debris. And you know it's got exactly the same texture, so it's really up to you which one you want to use. And it doesn't really matter, as it's going to be painted. Finally, a few patches of GW's Martian Iron Crust added dry desert crackle. As a rule of thumb with this crackle paint, the thicker the layer, the bigger the cracks are going to be. Now this is going to take a couple of hours to dry. I'd recommend leaving it overnight, so it might be worth starting this step just before bedtime. Once it's all dry, you're going to need to give it a base colour. I opted for black, but it is really up to you how you want to do this. You can either prime it or do what I did and use Baden Black. One rough coat is fine, as it doesn't need to be perfect. Now as this is going to be a desert theme, GW's Xandri Dust is a good start. Honestly, like the black undercoat though, one layer will be fine as it doesn't need to be perfect, and you're going to be covering it up mostly anyways. Now to bring out all the detail, you want to liberally add some GW shades. I went for Agrax Earthshade, Seraphim Sepia, and a touch of Drakenhof Nightshade. It will take a while to dry, so it might be a good time to get something done, get something to eat, do some gaming, have a nap, something that's going to take a few hours. Now the last painting step is to give this whole base a liberal and heavy dry brush with GW's Shabti Bone. You can go in and dry brush again with Xandri Dust if you want, just to move it back down, but it is up to you. As a final flourish, you can add grass. I went for 3 different sizes from GW. I used super glue, which in hindsight was probably not the best idea, as it can interact with the areas around it, making a cloudy type texture. Next time I'll probably stick to PVA glue. All you need to do now is just assemble the model and he's ready for battle. Now you can leave it here if you want, but if you want to make it look super fancy, I suggest that you add some weathering. Nothing too technical or complicated for this part, all you're going to do is grab a sponge and some paints. In this case, GW's dried bark is going to be what we need. Now there is an art to this technique. You're going to focus on the edges and the corners, places where chips, wear and tear and other damage is going to naturally occur. You can do this as little or as much as you want, but it really is starting to tell a story, so you're going to have to decide, is this battlesuit new off production line, or has it spent weeks in the field fighting? My advice really is not to be too rough, as you may damage the model, or in my case make the railgun and arm fall off. It did actually work out though, as it gave me access to parts of the model that I couldn't get to before. Now to add an extra touch to it, you'll want to grab some GW lead belcher. Go for the same areas again, but this time be a bit more sparing, and you'll see that it looks like the paint is worn down to the bare metal. Now the absolute last step to tie the model into the base is to grab some sandry dust and very lightly dry brush in and over the lower parts of the model. This will make it look dusty, like it's been out in it for a while. And that's it, you're done. This whole Tau Broadside took approximately 6 hours on and off over about 2 weeks. Now this is my first video, and it is my first time completing a mini in about 2 years, so I am pleased with the result, and I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. If you'd like to see more, you can support me by liking, sharing and subscribing, and you can also follow me on Instagram where I share my current and past projects, so it might pique your interest. If you've got any suggestions or tips on how to make my videos better, then please share them in the comment section. Until next time, and happy painting.